Okay, cool. So today's study group is going to be on section 4. So in this case, I believe we focus more on exploring your data, dealing with missing values. We introduce a few things. At this point, real quick, just thumbs up if you are on or starting section 3. Is anyone on section 4 right now? I don't expect anyone right now. Okay, that's okay. So big thing is that obviously to do a lot of the stuff for section 4, you'll have to know the ins and outs of section 3, which is really an introduction to Pandas, right? We had kind of mentioned at the very end of last study group section. So kind of a review of what Pandas is, or for people who might not have really gotten into section 3 yet. Pandas is this package that kind of builds on top of Python. And with that, you can basically, it's almost like, how do I say this? Well, okay, it's a package. It's basically almost like an extension to Python. It allows you to do a lot more stuff specific for data. And so data science in general right now just is in love with Pandas. You can talk to any data scientist and they know Pandas. They have that. Just to kind of let you know, though, there's other technologies or other, languages. For example, R, I don't know if you guys ever heard of R. R is a popular one for other data scientists too. It's built more of a statistical package, and they have some great statistical packages in there. For the record, it seems to be R has been falling out of favor in the past, couple years. It tends to be more and more Python and then Pandas, because Pandas basically is an extension of Python. That's what they really mean when they say Python. But one of the reasons why that Python and Pandas have been so popular is because, first of all, it's open source. Basically anyone can contribute to it. Everyone can see the source code of how it's written. So if you're really into research, you can actually go into the code and see exactly how it's written. And second is that R is more for people who were in statistics already, and which is great, but also data science isn't just statistics and just math. You also have to know the coding. You have to have coding ability. You have to be able to code this stuff. And Python is just much more common with people who are software engineers, computer science. So there's a lot of combination there. For example, Python is used in a lot of, for example, Dropbox and Google, they use Python. Google is probably a big one where we talk about later, and we'll talk about TensorFlow and machine learning algorithms. And they're developing things in Python mostly. And it's just, that's the language they have because all their software engineers know some form of Python. They're more likely to know Python than they know R. So that's kind of why we specifically look at Python and Pandas. But you can almost think of Pandas when we think data science. When we say Python, we pretty much mean also Pandas. It's kind of implied. And that's kind of how big of a deal it is. So the main thing you can kind of think of Pandas is there's two, two objects that you really care about, which are data frames and then series. And we talked about this last time, just kind of quick review. And you can think of a data frame. Who here, just kind of raise your hand if you did Excel? I think we had a few people last time who said you did Excel. So if you've done Excel, you know the spreadsheets kind of thing. Data frames are pretty much just like spreadsheets. That's literally what they are like, right? They're specific columns. Now, it's a little more structured in the sense that in a data frame, each column has to be a specific type. So in Excel, you can put a number, and then underneath there, put a date. Underneath that, you could put some words or something like that. In Pandas, in a data frame, each column has to be a specific type. Okay, whether that's an integer, a float, a string, a Boolean, whatever, right? And each of those columns are what we call a series with a capital S. It's a specific kind of type. And it turns out we'll later on find out that those are actually built with NumPy, which is another package, which is much more, it's very efficient. And so Pandas actually gets to use NumPy as its base. It's kind of like a foundation. So it ends up getting all these extra efficiencies. So we can actually do a lot of really cool things, processing through the data and stuff like that. You'll hear me say a lot of times vectorization. Vectorization allows us to not have to do these for loops. Turns out for loops are just take a long, long time to go through. Pandas can actually use this, take advantage of this vectorization, which makes things very, very quick. And we'll talk about this in the future too, to see this. So first thing I want to show, so I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see here. And you guys always disappear when I do this. Okay, just thumbs up if you can see my screen all right. Cool. All right, awesome. So let me move this off to the side, a little bit bigger. So the first thing I want to show you guys, there is this, this is also in the curriculum resources in that spreadsheet, and everyone knows how to find that now. I think I put it in the Slack's topic channel. But there's this resource that, again, one of the instructors, Eli, had put together. I'll send it out through Slack or through Zoom right now. Again, a couple cheat sheets and stuff like that, specifically about plotting in Pandas, okay, or using Pandas and plotting and stuff like that. We'll show a few of those. You can see, for example, we talk about data frames and doing that part into making into a plot. You can also see a series here. So you can see like each series can be plotted through. So a nice, quick little, really small little cheat sheet here. And then we have another cheat sheet, which I don't quite remember what it was. In this case, oh, okay. I think it's actually from the same one from last time, is your Python data science cheat sheet. Basically, it's a lot of Pandas. And you can see every time you see df, all that stuff, Pandas. And you can see there's pivots, pivot tables. Who here is familiar with pivot tables for Excel? Okay, yeah, so you can actually do a pivot table directly in Pandas, which, to be perfectly honest, I didn't know this for the longest time, that you could actually just call .pivot in Pandas and make a pivot table. So really useful if you are used to that in Excel. And we'll talk about that a little bit today, but there's other methods we can do. And then there's some good list of resources down right here that Eli had put together that, again, he always emphasized, like, it doesn't matter. It's not in a particular order. It's just like different resources. And so these are things if you want to like look a little bit more and see what's going through. Jake VDP, the Python Science Data Science Handbook, I'd strongly recommend that in general, not just for the specific section. I think that's a really good one to really go through. It's got a picture, I think, of like an iguana or something on it. It's a good one that I'll like read through, and just like, it also will tell you a lot of how Pandas is structured. So, and talk about that connection with NumPy, which I think helps explain a whole lot of like, why is Pandas letting me do this, but not this thing? Okay, so good thing to handle. And then there's a few other extra stuff as well. Okay, so good resource. Again, it's on the student resources spreadsheet, so you can find it on there. And then last thing, of course, he has a little notebook put together, which has note that some of the code will not run out of the box. So make sure when you're actually going through it, that's like, if it doesn't quite run, it's probably because it wasn't, there's certain files that aren't in there. But it's a good thing, like he explains a few things. I actually used some of this information, which the notebooks I put together for us today. So a good thing to look over. Okay, check it out. All right, cool. So I'll show you that. So that's going to go into what we're going to talk about today. And one thing I want to emphasize is that this part of the section, we're kind of like very quickly going through the data science lifecycle. We're just giving you all the tools very quickly, saying, all right, basically the first stuff we're doing is saying, hey, here's what Python is. And then last section, section 3, this is Pandas. This is how you basically load data into Pandas. And so now we're actually starting to look at a little bit different stuff. Later on, we'll talk about data mining, which will be actually in section 5, where we'll look at how to use SQL to actually basically query a SQL database and get that information. And we'll talk about what SQL is in the future. But basically, it's a way so we can get some extra data. And then we have our data cleaning process. And we're actually going to talk about a little bit this today. Say, hey, you know, if you have data, you'll hear data scientists call like data dirty data, you know, and we have to clean the data, we have to scrub the data wrangling. I think data scientists secretly hate data because it just always has these like really like negative terms. But like, it really is like a lot of this stuff is like, you know, dirty data. And what we mean by that is that the data is not formatted in the right way. It's not exactly what we want. And so we actually have to clean it and scrape it, and, you know, or not scrape it, clean it and scrub it and make sure basically it's a nice clean data set so we can actually do some interesting things with it, which includes later on predictive modeling, which again, predictive modeling is going to be that machine learning. We're going to learn a technique in this module, linear regression, which is still super powerful, but we'll start getting, in module 3, we'll especially go into some really, you know, interesting different techniques we can do. But we gotta get the basics first and all the math first before we get to that point. Okay, so just know that this section in particular, section 3, is really closer to the data cleaning and then even data exploration, basically seeing a little bit like, well, what does the data look like? All right, so I just wanted to point that out. But I want to show you guys first this package. So, okay, so the first thing is like working with data. And so first of all, one nice thing, you have to have a data set. So one, for example, the curriculum, which gives you guys a bunch of CSV files. And those CSV files basically have some data already pre-populated. Awesome, because it means you don't have to go search for it. You don't have to go look for this data. But no, in the real world, you'll probably have to either ask, whoever you're working with or whatever you're trying to do. There might be a company that has a specific SQL server or a data set. If you ever, who's heard of Kaggle? Okay, if you heard of Kaggle, so I only see a couple people who said that. Kaggle is actually a great resource. I'm going to show you just really quickly what that looks like. My career time. Okay, it's basically, what's it called? It started off as a competition, like you can do competitions to like say who can do the best prediction models, but also has a great set of data sets that people had collected over time, either from companies or that people had scraped together themselves. So you can also get information from this. So there's a bunch of ways you can get data and just play with it and just see what happens. If you ever go on Kaggle.com, Kaggle, kernels are a great one. So this is actually like, if you're like really bored during the break and you got everything all set up, kernels are probably a really great one, and just search for like hotness or, just most votes. And basically most of them, they're not all Python, some are in R, but they're basically data scientists who have like looked at some data and they might have done some training, but they also do, for example, sometimes people will actually, so for example, they'll read through this and they'll show some data exploration, see what these things look like. And what's really nice is that it's a great learning tool and they're really just sharing information out. And this is actually something you can do too to help you basically, what's it called? It can put you out there, kind of show what you can do. What's nice is that it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just something that you share and see what people have done and stuff like that. So a great resource to check out, like data exploration, especially, and then ultimately predictive modeling. Okay, but I wanted to point that out real quick. So anyway, I have this sklearn, which is a package that we have already pre-installed in the Learn environment. Okay, and it's pretty basic. It basically has a lot of stuff in here, but we can actually import some data sets. So I'm importing the diabetes data set just to kind of show you what this looks like. And just note that this is a function that's meant for sklearn. I'm loading it in, I'm calling it data. So it's just basically a bunch of data. You can think of it almost like a CSV file, okay? And so this right here, basically this PD, right? We usually call Pandas as PD, okay? And that's where we're importing it. We're importing the package Pandas as PD, okay? And what's it called? We'll actually use the method data frame to create a data frame, okay? If we had a CSV file, we'll see that in a second, we can actually read the CSV file with a different command. But in this case, because we're loading it from sklearn, we can just go ahead and do this part. And note that we have this column, this features names. That's something I know ahead of time. You don't have to know this yourself, okay? A lot of times, and you'll get used to what this looks like. So I'll rate it as a data frame, and then I'll actually show the head, which just basically means that I'll see part of the big data frame. So this is the whole data frame here. And I think it goes up to like 444 different numbers. So if I did the whole thing, let's see if I can do the whole thing. Let's split this. So let's do, instead of df.head, we can do the whole thing, and you can see it goes all the way down, and then Pandas like, oh, that's a lot of information, or Jupyter Notebook's like, that's a lot of information, let's cut it off. So you can see it goes all the way down to 441, okay. So you can see here, it's like, we can see each of these columns. So each of these columns are series like we talked about. Each of these rows right here can be represented by an individual data point. And in this case, we have age, sex, BMI, BP. Now we haven't really talked about like what this is, but for example, you'll see that age is like, whoa, that's a weird age. Why are there negatives in here? They did some fancy math work to get it ready for machine learning. So just know that there's scale in different ways. So they represent some number. For example, this sex, for example, there's only 2 sexes that we have for humans in this case. So there's only going to be this one and this one that's recorded in the data. And it turns out it's going to be male or female, or something else, right? But in this case, there's only 2. So this is where domain knowledge is useful, right? To know what this is going to represent, okay? But anyway, so that's our data frame, right? And a quick way to just kind of explore it is, oh, ahead and just say, cool, got our data. So I wanted to just have that so we can use it for later. So next thing I'm going to talk about, which is Lambda function. So if you guys are paying close attention, you might have seen a Lambda function in the solutions or talked about in the code and stuff. Like, who's ever seen like maybe mentioned about Lambda? Yeah. And if you kind of squint your eye, you might be like, what's this Lambda function doing? Like, we haven't talked about this yet. And this is what we're talking about now, right? So note that you guys are learning a little bit of like, showing some things and not showing some things. By the end of like section 5, you'll pretty much have a good feel of things that you've seen before. And if you see something that you haven't seen before, Google it or use the documentation that's built in. So anyway, Lambda functions are these things called, the curriculum calls them like throwaway functions, but technically they're called anonymous functions. So basically they don't have a name. So if you remember back when we actually did actually wrote functions, we can do f or dff, let's call it like double. And then we can give it a parameter, right? Like just one parameter. And then let's say we'll just return x times 2. So this is kind of like, this is not bad, right? But you can see it's kind of long, and then you can imagine this thing kind of get longer and stuff like that. And it's just like, this it's just a lot of work. And so we'll find in data science is that sometimes we can actually create these Lambda functions that are very, very simple, that do basically one thing, but we're going to call them over and over and over again, or not, we're not only going to use them just one time instead of using them over and over again, but we have to call it one time and then a new function one time and then a new function one time. And just get a real pain to do define like this. So we can create something called Lambda functions, okay? So the way you can read this is that we start off with Lambda just like we start off with def, right? Basically we're defining a Lambda function. This first value right here is the first parameter. So you can think of it like, this x right here. It's a variable waiting to be filled with some value, okay? We don't know what that value is yet, right? And then this colon is saying, hey, like if I space this out, I could have written like this. It's like, okay, you got your first parameter. All right, this is what you're going to do with it. Okay, and then it says, okay, take your first parameter, in this case x, and just multiply it by 2. Okay, that's what this function does. It takes that parameter x, multiplies it by 2, returns that. So what's kind of fun is that we can actually give it a name. So if I ran this by itself, you'll see that it doesn't really do anything. In fact, it just tells me what the type is. And it says, oh, hey, it's a type, it's a function, turns out. Okay, and that's what's like, oh, well, that's not really interesting. So we can actually assign it to a name, for example. So you can make these very quick, you can make your anonymous function, you can give it a name, okay? You can call it now double me, right? So I just give it a random thing. So you can see, oh, double me, and then so I can actually run this function just like normal, that first parameter. And so this should give us 2. And we see it's 2. If I gave it 20, we'd see it give us 40. If we give it the number 42, it would also give 84. Simple enough, right? Fun fact, has anyone got an idea what if I gave it the letter A, what it would do? I see you guys too. I don't know. Just try.
It would, right? No.
Yeah, it might break, but it turns out it. I don't. Sorry, I cut you off before you can answer, Giovanna. But yeah, it turns out in Python we can actually multiply by 2. If I instead of divide by 2, right, and gave it like 20, it would give us 10, right? If I give it the letter A, we can't divide, so it's going to give us an error. So note that it doesn't do a check. This is a very simple function. So note that this guy has to. Usually you'll know what kind of thing you're feeding it into. So just kind of look out for that. One thing to kind of show off a little bit for a Lambda function, and I'm just showing you guys some ways we can do it. We can actually do, let's see here. We can actually create some other functions with multiple, it doesn't have to be just one parameter, it can be multiple parameters. So for Lambda, I can do x comma y. And note that it doesn't have to be x and y, I'm just giving it x and y. For example, I could have put like first one, second one, okay. And then I can say, okay, let's do first one plus second one. Oops. All right, and this creates a function now with 2 parameters. So I can do 1 comma 3 or 1 comma 2, which will give us 3. Okay, we kind of got the right idea here. Note that I don't even have to use the parameters here. I could have also just put like number 1. And so no matter what I feed it, it'll always just give me 1, no matter what I do. So just kind of showing you like, how you can use a Lambda function and just showing the real basics of it, saying, what things you can do. But note that I can give, like I showed you, x comma y. Okay, I can now give it 2 parameters like this. And you can give it 3 parameters, 4 parameters. Usually, if you're doing more than 3 parameters, you're probably doing something a little too complicated, which means you probably need to do a full define function. And just know that Lambda functions, you have to, what's it called? You have to give it just, it can only do one thing. If it can't be written in one line, you can't use a Lambda function, okay? And that's because the reason why these exist is because we usually use these for very quick things in Pandas for vectorization and mapping, okay? So now I'm gonna show you guys when we would actually use a Lambda function, because right now it's just like, oh, that's an interesting quirk, but I don't know why we would use it. So you can see here, I have, let's see here, do I have the right thing? Yeah. So I have the data frame and I'm looking at just the age, right? Okay. And I'm saying, okay, what are all the different ages? And you can see, or in this case, I'm looking at just the head, the first 5. So you can see these are the ages. Obviously, they're normalized in some way. So there are some weird numbers, but just know it's some number, right? Well, okay, we can see 0.038, negative 0.01, all that stuff, right? And let's say for whatever reason, it's like, you know what, I want to times it by 1,000. I want to make them all into at least like whole, like not whole numbers, but more than 0, okay? So it's like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I can do this thing called map. So I can take something that's like a list, or in this case, it's actually a series. So I can actually use that series. And just to prove to you guys, it is actually in fact a series. If I do df, oops. I need to get a new keyboard. This keyboard's messing me up. If I do type, oh shoot. Sorry guys. Okay. Type, you can see that it is from Pandas, the package, and it's a series, okay, which is kind of like a list, but a special kind of list. You can't put any number you want in there. So anyway, I basically have a series right here, and I can map now a certain function onto here. And what will happen is that this will take, if I take off this part, and I'll just put like my result just to kind of show you guys so we can check it out, okay? So what this does right here, it says, okay, take the series, which is a list of these numbers, and basically when we do this dot map, it's saying, all right, take each of those numbers individually and do this to it. So in this case, it's saying, okay, take this number, and if you wanted me to put it like this, 1,000, it's the same thing, okay? And basically take each one of those numbers and multiply by 1,000. Then take the next number, multiply by 1,000. Take the next number, multiply by 1,000. So now we should have everything on that list essentially multiplied by 1,000, okay? So now if I do my result, which I just saved it so that way it's easier to see, and I'm gonna see like the first 5 elements, and you'll see now it's the same thing, but this time it's multiplied by 1,000. Note I also could have made them all like 0, right? And I would have made them all 0 in that case, okay? Note that, however, this has not changed. If I run this again now, this df_age.head, it's still head. I haven't changed that I haven't changed those values at all. So if you want to keep that change, in this case I don't, but if I wanted to keep that change, I would have to do df like age like this, okay? And this would overwrite that column of information, okay? This is basically data frames treat everything what they call out of place. For the most part, almost every function you do in Pandas will treat the data frame out of place. And the reason why we do that is because we want our data to be nice and clean, and we don't want to like mess with it. We want to keep it so it's like, okay, what's it called? We want to keep our raw data, our first initial part, and then make changes, but we don't want to change the original stuff because we might want to go back to it. So that's why it does it out of place, okay? If you want to do in place, you could do certain things, but usually it's not considered kosher. It's not the best thing to do because it can really mess you up if you didn't realize you're doing it in place, okay? So anyway, that's how you would use a Lambda function with a mapping. Okay. Any questions so far on this? Cool. Thumbs up. Feeling like pretty good? All right, cool. You guys are smart. You guys got it. All right. So this gets a little more complicated. And so it's still a Lambda function, but remember I said you can't put, you have to write it in one line. If you can't write in one line, you can't do a Lambda function. I'm basically doing something right here where I'm doing the same thing where I'm saying, okay, times it by 1,000 if the x is greater than 0. Otherwise, else, multiply it by 1,000, but also multiply by -1. Okay, so this way it allows, like, you know, these negatives right here, those will be positive. So if I go back to multiplying x times 1,000, oh, right, because I changed it over. That was dumb. See what I mean when you do the, okay, now it should be fine. Let's get rid of this guy. There we go. Okay. So that way we don't change it up. So now we can see, like, okay, we can actually make this change, but this case we can do an if statement, conditional within here. And we can basically, this right here, this code is on top. This is from the curriculum. But of course I have a different data frame, so I didn't use it. So just note that basically it's this part right here, and you can kind of read it like almost like an English sentence, right? Do this if x is greater than 0. Otherwise, else, do this. That's kind of what a conditional is in one line. Note that this isn't specific to Lambda functions. This could have also been done with just in normal Python, but this allows us to write it in all in one line, okay? And so if you look at this now, we'll see the same thing, but this time they're always positive because I checked if it was negative or positive, okay? So this is really useful when we're going through the data and we want to clean some stuff. And we're like, okay, we want to do these things and we want to do it for each line, okay? So this is Lambda functions are quick ways. People always ask me, it's like, but can't we just write a function, like define? And you totally could. You could have just written a function. For example, if you remember my double right here, right, which will just return the double, okay? I could have done it right here. Where are you at? There you are. I could have written double. Let's just do double. I called it double me, right? No, just double. Okay. So if I run this now, it'll actually just double everything. So you can see it just multiplied. So you could have written your own function, right? Like just like this define part. But what happens is like if we have a very small function, the problem is we have to write those functions over and over and over again. And the problem is that it divorces us executing the function and the actual definition of the function. It's much easier to like debug things when we like make a mistake. Like, wait, what did double do? Like, I don't remember what it did. You have to go find where double was defined, you know, wherever it was. Versus like we can change it right then and there, right in the code, and we can see where it happens. So that's the reason why we actually tend to use Lambda functions for a lot of these little process parts. Okay, cool. Thumbs up still? Still good? All right, awesome. And this one just shows an example. If you remember, if we do, let me just show you guys again. If we do df dot, oh, not df dot, sex, right? So it was some number. If you remember, it's like, oh, that's super weird looking, right? Like that's not male. Like I'm assuming it's male and female. You know, it could be wrong. You know, but the whole point is like yeah, I think it's sex. I think it's male and female. There's only 2 values. In fact, we'll see. We could do like unique, which will show up in a second. We can say, oh, those are the only 2 values that ever show up. So it's probably either male or female. So, okay, well, I want to change it. And let's just pretend I know that this number right here is male and this number is female. Okay. It's like, okay, well, I want to see that so it's easier to see. So now I can say, okay, let me do this right like this. Okay. So df sax, basically I'm going to overwrite that, what's it called? That column, right? And I'm going to take the column originally, map, and basically say, okay, for x, for each value, make it female if it's less than 0. So basically these values will be, this value will be female, and then otherwise I'll make it male. And just to kind of show you guys, I can actually add on to it. Let's just do sex new, okay? And just to kind of show you that we can do this part. So if I run this now, it'll create a new column. It'll do this part, taking the column of sex, and then make a new column called sex new, all right? So now I have this, and actually I can do df.head, and you will see now that there's a new column called sex new, male, female, male, female. If I was like, you know what, I want to actually overwrite this, I could have put it just sex right here, and now it'll overwrite this part, and you'll actually see sex right here. This column will actually be now male, female, male, female. Okay, so these are some ways you can actually modify your data and go through the data. Okay, cool. So I'm going to move on to the next part called aggregation. So this one's probably, to be honest, it been in my mind for a while because I was like, wait, what are we doing? Basically, there's a way we can actually basically aggregate like group bys, which is actually really what pivot tables are. If you're ever wondering like a pivot table, basically you're doing aggregation so you can aggregate all the things that are similar together and looking at just that part. That's what a pivot table is. And we actually can do that with Pandas with a group by. So just to show you real quick, we have our BMI, right? And I'm just getting that specific column of, where is it, BMI right here. And I'm just gonna get that BMI and we're gonna say a few things. I'm gonna display what the count is, display what the mean is, display what the count is. Did count twice, okay. We don't need it twice. But basically we can see, okay, these different values. And there's a few other things like median and mode and stuff like that you could do. So you can see, for example, it says, oh, there's 442 values in the BMI series. And then we can also do, oh, the mean of this is this very, very small number, okay? You can also do something like the max and say like, oh, what's the highest value? Oh, okay, cool. And then obviously we can do the min. We can see, oh, it's very, very small, all right? So the whole point is basically, say, okay, we can very quickly look at one column. But let's say we wanted something like, hey, I want to know for the sex of it, right? So it's male or female, right? I want to know what the BMI, the median BMI for males are and the median for females are. Well, you can do this with basically a, what's it called? A group by. So this is a special term right here, dot group by, okay? And note, I'm calling it on top of the data frame, do a group by, and I'm grouping by sex, okay? And this will say, okay, group it by sex, and then give me the max of each, the max of that. And you'll see it doesn't apply just for one, it'll apply for age, for BMI, BP, all that stuff, okay? If we run this now, you can actually see that it has male and female, because they're only in 2 categories. And you see what the max age is, what the max BMI is, max BP is. If I wanted just the BMI at the very beginning, I could have done, okay, group it by sex. And then basically this will give us, if you imagine, I'll show you what this looks like real quick. This actually gives us like another table, but you notice nothing looks different. It's because we haven't done any aggregated functions on it. So what we can do is we say, okay, group by sex, okay, and get just the BMI. All right, so that means instead of getting like this max age, max BP, all that stuff, we can get just the BMI, and now we can actually get this little tiny thing. It's like, okay, get the female, get the male. Basically, it's just calling this one column, which is just a series. So again, if I were to do like type, you'll see that this is a series, right? Okay, so you can see I can very quickly max. If I wanted to get the min, same thing. Okay, I can also do the count, saying how many people are female versus male in here. And you say, oh, okay, there's a little bit more females than there are male. So you can do these kind of things very quickly with group bys, right? That's one aggregation. We can actually aggregate multiple ones. So this works better if there's more than one category. In this case, I just have it, I just did sex and blood pressure, or I'm assuming it's blood pressure, BP. And then we can actually see what's the maximum of if you're grouping sex and BP. So we can see real quickly, it groups it by, I'll kind of scroll down a little bit right here. You can see the first grouping is sex, and you can see it's actually stacked on a different level. So it's saying, oh, we're grouping it by these 2 things, in this case, sex and BP, and then these are the rest of the values here. So you say, okay, for females who have a blood pressure of this, females have a blood pressure of this, females have a blood pressure of this, they group them together. Note that there's probably not too many repeats of blood pressure, so it's not going to be the best example, but if we had another categorical value, we could have possibly had something like that. So if I look now here, there's male and male for their specific blood pressures and their maximums for each. Okay, cool. Any questions on aggregations that I just showed? No comments? Thumbs up, sideways, thumbs down, sideways. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, I think group bys took me a long time, like to be perfectly honest. And there's a lot more examples in the curriculum itself that I think do go through. I can only go through so much at a time, right? But the main thing you have to know for group bys is that you're basically grouping it by a specific column, and then you can do an aggregate function with like a dot count, dot mean, dot, basically you're using some value, you're grouping them together and then doing some value. If you just do a group by and there's nothing else, you can't really say anything because they said, cool, you grouped it by, but we don't know what you want. We don't want any aggregation. And this will come up again when we talk about section 5 for SQL. You'll see group by and you'll see that similarity in there too. Okay. One last thing is that I mentioned about unstacking. So if you noticed right here, they're stacked on top, so there's sex, BP, right? Those are both aggregated on here. We can unstack it. So for example, this is kind of similar where we have the first and the second. So in this case, it aggregated it by bar and then aggregated it by 1, 2, right? Same thing with BAS, 1, 2. So you can kind of see the similarity where we had female and then the different blood pressures, okay? And so this would be like the sex, and then this would be like BP. And so sometimes like, well, you know what? We want to use that, like, we would rather have it just grouped by one specific one, and then have up here, basically you can move that as part of your new column. So you'll see what this looks like when I actually do, well, let's show you what this looks like, right? So again, that's just what we saw from before, where we have a grouping by sex, by BP, and now I can unstack it where you'll see that sex is a separate one. So basically you can see, oh, these are all the females and males for age. These are the females and males for age. So in this case, you actually can see that for this blood pressure, whatever that blood pressure represents, there were no males with that blood pressure. And this was the females for that blood pressure. But here we can see, oh, there was multiple ones, at least for male and female. And this was the maximum for female, and this is the maximum for male. So this makes it a little easier to read through if we wanted to compare those two. This can be useful if you're like doing multiple indexes. To be honest, it can get kind of confusing too as you do unstacks and stacks, and just kind of know that that is a tool that's available for you. Okay, cool. So last thing, I'm not actually going to go through it, but the curriculum goes through it for combining data frames. I do want to show you some last thing about exploring data with null values, but just know that you can combine data frames, and we'll talk about this again in SQL, so that's why I'm not kind of harping on it too much. But know that there's different joins: outer join, inner join, and then left and right join. There's also full outer joins, which honestly, outer joins in general, usually is not very common. It's just not a thing that people tend to do, but no, you can do it. And just know that it basically takes these two data frames, basically two spreadsheets, and combine them together, whether that means combining all of them together like an outer join, getting just the intersection with an inner join, or getting just the stuff from one data frame, which is the left join, plus some extra information. I'm not going to go full detail, just know that it exists right now. Okay, but we'll talk about this again definitely when we talk about SQL. So expect that, I guess, from like about a week, like a week and a half from now. That's when we'll talk about joins, but the curriculum shows it quite a bit, so I'm not going to harp on it. All right.